excited to be here, seeing all of your faces. This is so amazing. Thank you. So when Jamie asked me to do the event, she, in typical Jamie fashion, said, this is going to be an event full of love and letting people know that they're worthy of their goals and their dreams. And so I was like, yeah, sign me up. She didn't give me many specifics. So one day, I was scrolling Instagram. And along with a lot of you, I saw for the first time some of the other speakers that would be at this event. Tony Robbins, Ed Mylett, Jay Shetty, like the ultimate speakers and motivators of the motivators. I also saw at the same time that my team had selected a headshot of me in a powder blue cowboy hat. Yeah. To go on the Becoming Unstoppable ad. And at first I panicked, seeing my face up there in my cowboy hat with the rest of the crew. And then I remembered the message that we're all here to hear today. And that is that we are worthy. I also know that we are supposed to fire the lie that if we stand out, we'll get kicked out. So here I am with my Southern roots and cowboy boots. And they haven't kicked me out yet. Oh, the horse. So if you guys can't tell from my accent, I grew up in Western Kentucky on a farm with 23 of my first cousins. I was the oldest of all these 23 cousins, and we were really close. We were more like brothers and sisters than we were first cousins. And our childhood was truly idyllic. Picture us like spread out over across this big piece of land, catching snakes and frogs and riding four-wheelers. We were really fearless. So some might call us a little feral, which would also be totally fair to say, but it was the way that we grew up, and it was truly an incredible way to grow up. So in the middle of this massive family farm was the heartbeat of our family, and that was my grandpa, Pawpaw Bud. Pawpaw Bud was one of the most special men that you would ever encounter in your life. Imagine a man who was always smiling, always laughing. He had a big cigar in his mouth at all times, and he wore a diamond pinky ring that he'd lose the diamond out of every 6 months, bush hogging a field or cleaning out a chicken coop. And he was truly the most incredible man that I've ever met. And Papa Bud, he had these two amazing qualities about him that would later become part of my message and my mission of living fully. First, he taught us to be fearless, just by the way he lived. He wasn't afraid of bad things happening to him because honestly, a lot of bad things had already happened to him. He truly grew up in a way that he didn't fear adversity because Papa Bud knew that how we chose to deal with pain not only revealed our character, but it strengthened it. The second quality he had was noticing good things in others and calling them out. It's like he could multiply the good qualities in you by bringing them to the surface. You would always leave filling the room 10 feet tall when you left his presence, and it was such a gift. He always wanted us to be confident in being exactly who we were, even if that means wearing a feather dress amongst the best speakers in the world. He would have really loved this. So my grandpa noticed in me something as a little girl. He noticed my love of singing, and he encouraged me at a really early age. So Papa Bud would take me from our little tiny town in Kentucky all the way to Nashville, Tennessee for voice lessons every Wednesday after school with my grandma. And then he would take me all the way to places like Houston, Texas to record demos and CDs that he would then let me sell at Bud's Country Corner. So we had this little grocery store, liquor store, and pawn shop on our little country corner. And all 23 of us cousins worked there. Now, some of my other cousins had to do the harder labor like mopping floors and restocking cigarette shelves, which I know is highly controversial, but it was a different day and time. But he would let me sell my CDs to the farmers and the coal miners that would come into Bud's Country Corner. So he just really fostered this gift in me from a young age. And it took me really far from this small farming community in Kentucky onto some much larger stages. So I went from singing at every county fair, wedding, and funeral in my hometown to some bigger opportunities like opening for country music bands in the summer, singing for NBA playoff games, the national anthem. I continued to record albums. I went on to win Miss Kentucky in 2009, and I was a runner-up. Thanks. I was a runner-up in Miss America in 2010. And more opportunities came my way. I got to be on 3 seasons of The Amazing Race with my dad, and I went on to host travel shows abroad, and it was one success after another. And around that time, I began to adopt the mindset that I had to outdo my last achievement. And during this time, I had some of my biggest spotlight moments of my life. But I also started having some of my worst days. Because as time passed and when my success started to slow down and eventually stop and the opportunities slowed, I felt like I wasn't living up to what other people expected me to do next. As Jamie would say, my self-confidence, it was at the highest due to all my external achievements. But when they were all stripped away, my self-worth was almost nothing at all. On the outside, I was shining bright with all of these achievements, and on the inside, I was really starting to suffer. Early on in my success, I needed some help to keep up this additional pace, so I walked into a doctor's office and said, I really need some help to keep going. And they prescribed me a medication that I didn't really need to help me keep going during the day. And then eventually, I couldn't sleep. So I went back and I said, I can't sleep anymore at night. And they prescribed me a medication to sleep. And just like that, I was on the pharmaceutical equivalent of uppers and downers. Add in dependence on alcohol, and 2 years passed, and this medication that once felt like a flame of nonstop energy, it threatened to be a wildfire that was going to burn my entire life to the ground. Because while the opportunities stopped, the dependence on that medication didn't. And ultimately, this led me to spiraling out of control. In the spring of 2014, I was admitted into a treatment center for my dependence on alcohol and prescription medication. And I was the furthest cry from that happy girl growing up with her cousins on a farm in Kentucky. I thought to myself, how in the world did I get here? It happens so slowly though, doesn't it? And then you get to a place where you're almost unrecognizable, even to yourself. But life has a funny way of ushering us into our destiny. So when I entered into that treatment facility, I was still in a little bit of denial about just how much these external achievements really were tied to my self-worth. I thought, maybe I'll graduate early. I was like, okay, I'll get sober and they'll let me go. I'll go back to my normal life. But as you learn, if you know anything about recovery or treatment, it's never the drugs and alcohol. It's always what was underneath that got you there in the first place. And I stayed there for a long time. And at the end of 5.5 months, I had done some of the most important work of my life. Over my time in treatment, they stripped away every piece of me that I'd been clinging to for dear life. Things I was falsely putting my self-worth in, my achievements, my appearance, my titles, what I was going to do next. Everything that made me feel like who I was, they took it. Or at least the version that I thought other people wanted me to be. And it was painful, and it was super disorienting, but it ended up being truly the thing that brought me back to myself. This experience was really powerful, and I write a lot more about it in my first book, Living Fully. But what's important to share with you guys today is something that happened to me on my last day of treatment. So they were checking protocol, and they realized that there was actually something that I was supposed to do the first week that I was there that I hadn't done yet. And they said, this is going to be a little weird doing it on the last day, but you have to check these things off the list. So you're going to do it today. And they handed me a poster board. And they said, I want you to write in the center of this poster board the person that you admire the most, the person who embodies the spirit and the qualities and everything that you want to be in your life, maybe when you walk out these doors of treatment. So you heard the first part of my story. I put my grandpa in the center of this circle. And I put his name, and off to the side, I put all these characteristics that made him the person that I admired the most. Things like living fully and making it through adversity. How he would face things head on, just the way that he would make people feel. All of these things I put around this circle. And then part of this exercise was that I was to present my poster to my small group. It was about 8 women, and we knew each other really well at that point in time. And I stood up there and I presented my poster, and I was met with silence. Nobody said anything. And so I sat there for about 20 seconds. And finally, I looked at the girls' faces in my group, and I looked at one of my friends, and she had tears in her eyes. And she said, "Mallory, that's exactly how we describe you. That is how we describe you." And that statement made me so emotional that day. And honestly, it still does, because to think that they saw these qualities in me, that really got me. I was really terrified at that point in time that I'd gone so far down my own road, that I'd made so many mistakes, that there was no way that I could encompass a spirit even close to my grandpa's. He was my hero on earth. And the fact that they saw some of those qualities in me, it was in that moment that I realized something. I was who I wanted to be all along. Without the titles, without the opportunities, heck, I'd even taken my hair extensions out at that point in time. I got them back in. Once I stripped away all these external things that I had been clinging to for dear life, because I thought these things would help me to avoid pain, I was who I wanted to be all along. And that was actually a lot more like my grandpa than I thought. And I bet once you strip away all those things that you're hanging on to for dear life, I bet you're a lot closer to the person you want to be too. Maybe these things you need to strip away are not thinking you're living up to your expectations, or maybe it's pressure that you put on yourself, or maybe it's the weight of your career, pressure your family puts on you. Whatever your treatment center moment is, let that be the launching point to your destiny. Because walking out of that treatment center on that last day, I thought this would be the darkest part of my story. I thought it was something I'd be embarrassed of, certainly not something that I'd share on a stage this big. And y'all, it ended up being the best thing that ever happened to me in my life. It was the catalyst that catapulted me into the very best version of myself. As Jamie likes to say, setbacks are God's set-ups. And I realized that day I did not have to fear adversity, which was a quality that I admired a lot in my grandpa. And I learned that the adversity he went through, it wasn't something that he just held his breath and made it through. It was something that made him who he was. And this experience, it made me who I am today. I am so much better for what I went through. And your hardships are going to make you better too. I know it. So don't be afraid of it. Don't be afraid of whatever adversity you're experiencing or need to walk into. Don't be afraid to open door number 2, because door number 1 seems familiar. Don't let your fear of adversity overcome your ability to live fully. Be more afraid of missing out on living a full life than you are of experiencing pain within it. Don't let your past define your future, because this is it. This is your life. And you have the choice to grab a hold of the life that you've always wanted to live. And you are worthy of that. And you're the only one that can do it for yourself. And y'all, I believe you can. I know, because I did it. Now, since this time, 10 years ago, a lot's changed in my life. I have a global lifestyle brand called Living Fully. We've grown to a community of millions and millions. I have a podcast and a merchandise line. I wrote 2 books. I got married. I have 3 precious children. Obviously, my habits have completely changed. And building this life has been nothing short of pure joy. In the fall of 2023, I started my latest project that Jamie teased to, a luxury pajama line called In My Sundays. As an avid pajama lover, I wanted to create a luxury pajama at a more affordable price point, and it took off like a rocket. But while the success of my pajama brand started to build, something else was happening simultaneously. And that is that my grandpa's health started to decline. And by the time we got to Christmas, this past Christmas in 2023, things weren't looking great. Now, Christmas Eve on the farm in the urban household is a huge celebration. It is almost 100 people, and it is just a party. But by the time we got to Christmas Eve, my grandpa's health, it wasn't doing great. So some of my aunts and uncles and the nurses suggested, y'all, maybe we should just come one family at a time so we don't put too much strain on him. Well, my grandpa got wind of that and he said, ain't no way. We are going to have a party. We're doing it. And he wanted all of us there, and we were all there in all our glory. 23 grandchildren, 23 great-grandchildren, all my aunts and uncles, and we sang and we danced. He sat in his chair and he was drinking bourbon with a huge smile on his face. You just saw that picture. That was from that night. And it was the purest version of living fully that I've ever seen. That next day was Christmas Day, and my grandpa, being the avid entrepreneur that he is, he was asking me all about my pajama line. He was asking me about profit margins and the size of my warehouse and all these ideas that he had, including one about putting a nursery in my warehouse in case I ever had to go to the warehouse, I could bring my kids with me. He always loved the fact that I could have my family with me when I was doing what I was doing. And as we were laughing and sharing ideas, he looked at me in the eyes and he put his hand on my arm and he said, Mal, I got so many ideas left in me. I just don't have any more time. My grandpa passed away the next day. And those words he said to me on Christmas Day, it felt like a moment where he was passing on our family legacy in this torch to me in a different way than he'd ever done before. Even until his last moments of his life, he was living life to the absolute fullest. And what he said to me that day, it was such a gift because it reminded me that time is a luxury and the ultimate gift and something that's not a guarantee. And right now, in this moment, you have the gift of time. You can change your life. You also have something that my grandpa didn't have anymore, and that's time. So let my grandfather's legacy be a reminder to you to strive for a full life until the very end, because you can change your life. If you're going through a season of adversity, do not waste your precious gift of time thinking, I've just got to hold my breath and make it through this. Switch your thinking to, I'm going to be made through this. Because you aren't just going to make it through this. You're going to be made the person that you're meant to be through this adversity. I know it. And if you're doubting yourself, don't waste your precious gift of time focusing on all that's wrong, and as a result, become a smaller version of yourself. Like Jamie says, don't shrink who you are to fit into spaces too small for your destiny. Focus on the things that make you unique and different and special. Have the courage to wear the powder blue cowboy hat and the full feather blazer and the cowboy boots. And don't let fear shrink you into a smaller version of yourself. Once you remove all those inner thoughts of fear and criticism, you're going to realize exactly what I did on the last day of treatment when I did that exercise with that poster board. That you are a lot closer to the person you think than you even realize. And if your past isn't what you want it to be, do not waste your time thinking that your past defines your future. You truly have the power to make a change today. So let this vision of a better future be your motivation to finally change your life. Today, you have the gift of time. So act on those ideas in your heart. May today be the day that you're willing to take that first step, because time is a gift and a resource that we can never get back. So tell me in that chat box, how will you begin living fully today?
Up here crying off our makeup.
Sorry, I cried. I know.
So
I've got
I'm
an It
inspired by
Cosmetics,
you
so
to
it's
dress fun. So I've got my cowboy
love
boots.
it.
I feel very Mallory Urban vibe. I love it.
Oh, you look always look.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for being here. That was so powerful. People are crying backstage. Beautiful story. One more time, you guys. Can you show some love? Show some love. I see the chat blowing up for Mallory Urban in the house. Mallory Urban in the house.
Thanks, Jamie. You're so sweet. I gotta make sure my feather dress stays together here. I might not want to get a full body shot right now. I love it though when I asked you if I could wear feathers and you said, yes, you have to wear feathers. Like, be yourself.
I'm
You
like,
are
be
worthy.
yourself. Yeah. You want me to turn the chair a little bit? Are you good?
good.
You're good. Okay. So here's the thing. You've touched the hearts of countless, we're talking about countless women, mostly women, but women and men who follow you online. And it's not just, it's because you show the real of everything, the fun and the glamorous, but the messy and the raw and the real and the behind the scenes. And so many people right now, are working on courageously sharing who they are, sharing who they are. And what is your advice on how to do that? Because it can be scary for a lot of people. And, just to put this in perspective, there's a lot of people that, they don't want to be an influencer, but they now have to go on Zoom in their job, or they're a doctor that now has to have a personal brand to do well. It's almost like every profession, right, has been shifting where your personality and who you are is now part of this public facing, what feels like part of your job. And so this is something now that's just relevant to almost everybody.
Yes, I agree.
And how do you have that courage to say, this is all of me, which is, by the way, the only way you have an authentic connection with any human being, whether it's customers and other persons, if you show up as who you truly are, but we're scared to do it. So,
yes.
Yeah.
Well, first I would say, Jamie, that people like you so much better when you actually show up like that. Like, we're always so fearful. Like, what if I show up as who I really am, or a different version of who I am without the mask? Everybody likes the mask exercise. And in my own experience, because experience is our greatest teacher, like, people just love you so much more for it. But I've been in the online space for a long time. And in the beginning, I did only show up with like the full face of makeup and like the perfect clothes and my hair completely done. And y'all, if you watch Instagram stories nowadays, like, Jamie always encourages me for showing up as exactly who I am. We have rolled out the bed and there is no makeup and I haven't brushed my hair or my... it is really...
You take all your hair out.
It's gone for them.
Yeah.
I present that to people because I want to remind y'all, that like, there's nothing like seeing somebody else do that encourages you to be your authentic self. And, I just shared my story of like recovery. And so I had been in the online space like maybe 6 years before I decided to write this book, before my amazing literary agent encouraged me to write this book. And I started to just feel like I was just showing the life on the other side. So I was showing like my husband and getting married and children and like my home and all of these fun, beautiful things that is what my life looked like on the other side of this adversity. And I started feeling like I've got to share the backstory of how I got here. Because like, as we've all been talking about today, it's like, that's what gets us to the person that we are. So, that was a big moment in time where I decided to share about this adversity. And that was really, showing up with no makeup and no hair extensions and just like, as you are every day is easy. But that was really hard for me.
Yeah.
And you said something to me, you probably don't even remember, the night before my book came out. And I was like, really? Because you can't stop the freight train. The book was coming out and there was nothing I could do. It was already in the Targets and online and everything. And I was like, I'm just really nervous. I don't know how it's going to be received, to show everybody everything. And you said, Mallory, if you want to impress people, show them your success. But if you really want to impact them, show them I think you may have said failures, or you said like, show them this story. And that is something that I will never forget. Because I wanted to impact people. I didn't want to impress people anymore. I wanted to really impact. And you don't even realize like what that line did for me that day. So thank you for that. You helped me feel worthy that day.
Well, I want to ask you this